a happy latte, a dollop of love sprinkled with a log cabin in the Drakensberg Mountains, and please, I want a house with a great view of those mountains. Too bad life isn't like that, is it? Life often hands us a concoction completely different from that which we expected. Hey, Mr. Jones, enjoy your retirement. Unfortunately, it's going to come with marital problems and, well, finances, there are none. Hey, Mary Adams, it looks like you put in for 4 years of university, and then marriage to the guy of your dreams, and then a wonderful pregnancy and bouncing babies. Too bad you're pregnant now. University is off the cards, and about that guy of your dreams, well, not so sure about that. And that's what happens in this life, hey? It comes with surprises, it comes with modifications, it comes with alterations, it comes with transitions. And some changes are welcome, other changes are not. And sometimes we are in a season and we expect certain things to happen, and then, bah, they don't happen like we expected at all. Like a box at a service station once said, if you're tired of change, put it here. Change is difficult. And many times, change can rock our boats. How many of you discovered that life is sometimes like this picture we're going to put up for you now? You might have expected to have a life that is decaffeinated, everything is smooth sailing, but life just has a way of rocking our boats. The disciples expected, you follow Jesus, life is going to be great. It didn't work out like that. And so I want to take you this morning to the book of Matthew, the first of the Gospels. And Matthew chapter 8 and verse 23 starts this amazing story, you know it well. Jesus got into the boat and his followers went with him. Verse 24, we're reading from the New Century Version. A great storm arose on the lake, so that the waves covered the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. Verse 25 reads, his followers went to him and woke him up, saying, Lord, save us, we will drown. Jesus answered them, why are you afraid? You don't have enough faith. Then he got up, he rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. Verse 27 reads, the men were amazed at this. What kind of a man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. You know, at first glance, you might be thinking Jesus is kidding, right? When he asked the question, why are you so afraid? Surely he's just teasing them. Surely he knows, surely Jesus understands, fear is part of our lives. It's like one swimmer asking another swimmer, why are you wet? Doesn't make sense. But Jesus is not smiling. He is deadly earnest. But so are his disciples. A storm has turned the Galilean dinner cruise into a white-knuckled ride of terror. Look at Matthew's description again. Jesus got into a boat. His disciples followed him. His followers went with him. A great storm arose on the lake, so that the waves covered the boat. Years later, when Matthew would actually pen these words, because he didn't sit in the back of the boat writing this down. Years later, he would sit down and he would recall this incident, and he would be remembering this terrible night, the terror-filled night on the lake. And I imagine that Matthew got out his Greek thesaurus, and he was looking for the words to describe this incredible storm on the sea. Rainfall, it wasn't just a rainfall. Spring shower, it wasn't a spring shower. A passing squall, no, that wouldn't cut it. That wouldn't capture what he saw and what he felt that day. This was more than just a little storm with some white tops on the waves. And then he comes across this word, seismos. We know that word, don't we? We know that the word a seismologist, what does he do? He measures earthquakes. And a seismograph that measures the strength of earthquakes. And so Matthew uses this word only 2 other times in his Gospels. Once he used the word to describe how the ground shook when Jesus died on the cross. And then he uses the word seismos when Jesus is risen from the dead. And then he uses the word again to describe this day in a boat, in a storm on the lake. This apparently for him deserved a spot in the trilogy. Death, resurrection, and the defeat of fear by Jesus. This was a seismos event. This was a sudden fear. We know that the fear was sudden because the storm was. The old translation reads, suddenly a great tempest arose on the sea. You know what? Not all storms are sudden. Many times you can see the storms coming. The last place you ever want to be on this planet in a storm is in a small boat on the sea. But the storm came out of nowhere and turned the Sea of Galilee into this boiling cauldron. And the boat was like a little cork bobbing up and down. 1 minute the disciples were enjoying this very peaceful, was it a dinner cruise on the Galilee? And the next minute they were fearing for their lives. Peter and John, of course, were hardened fishermen. They'd seen storms before, but this was no ordinary storm. I imagine Peter and John were up there, or they were pulling on the ropes and trying to get the sail down, because any little bit of sail would have been ripped to shreds. Of course, on the other, one of the other crewmen was Matthew. And of course, Matthew was not a sailor. He was not a fisherman. He was a tax collector, but he was on the boat with Jesus. What do you think Matthew was doing? Do you think Matthew was holding his stomach, leaning over the edge, puking his lungs out? This was more than Matthew had ever bargained for. In verse 23, Matthew records these words. He links these 3 phrases together. Jesus got in the boat, and his disciples and his followers went with him, and a great storm arose on the boat. All the disciples did, they just followed Jesus. Matthew, I guess, had dreamt of recording these words. Jesus got in the boat, the disciples followed him, and a great rainbow appeared in the sky. This tax collector could have dreamt that Jesus got in the boat, the disciples followed him, and this beautiful flock of doves just flew overhead. Matthew could have recorded in his dreams, Jesus got in the boat, and as they left the shore, the beautiful mast cast an amazing reflection in the water below. But folks, this story is not so subtle. It's not so inept. This is a subtle reminder, folks. This you need to hear this. That disciples who follow Jesus sometimes get caught in storms. Jesus' disciples get caught in storms. You can do exactly what Jesus tells you to do and still land up in a storm. Christians get cancer. Christian followers bury their children. Christian followers face unresolved requested high doses of caffeinated events that can really rock their boats. And Matthew chapter 8 and verse 24 records this: Jesus was sleeping. You might have to help me with this. The disciples were screaming and Jesus was dreaming. Thunder roars and Jesus snores. Can you imagine? Our Savior is at the stern of the boat, that's the back of the boat, and he's catching some Z's. Who would sleep in a seismos? Could you sleep on a roller coaster? Could you sleep at a drum contest? Could you sleep in a wind tunnel? But Jesus slept through this event. It contained all three. Can you imagine the noise and that roller coaster? The sound of this hectic wind. But you know, in Mark's gospel, so that's Matthew how he records it. Mark records it slightly different. He adds two other details. Mark chapter 4 and verse 38. Jesus was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. How many of you, when you travel, take your pillow with you? You know, you take your pillow, your own pillow. You can use your own pillow. Derek, I've got a very special pillow. It's not one of this foam nonsense. It's a down pillow. It's a feather pillow. I love that pillow. But this is not what's happening here. Jesus doesn't travel around, follow me, he's got his pillow and his disciple. The pillow, most scholars believe that this was probably ballast, these 40 kg sort of Hessian bags full of ballast. And often the sailors would use them, even in the Mediterranean they use it as ballast today, but it's a great place to put your head. So Jesus is probably at the back, where the nets are stored under a little hooky there. And he said, this is great. And he's climbed up onto the nets and he's pulled one of those bags and he has for himself a pillow. Jesus didn't just doze off. I think this was a premeditated sleep. He possibly said, I sense a storm coming on. I think I'll take a nap. The view our God has of storms is entirely different from the one we have of storms. Amen? The way God sees storms is totally different from us. Isn't it wonderful to have a God who is unstirred by those things that stir us? Isn't it wonderful to have a God who looks at the storm and says, I can calm that? Isn't it wonderful to have a God that when the world is turned upside down, he says, I can turn that right side up. I think that's why this story is in the Bible, to remind us who is in control. And it's not you, and it's not me. I think the story really ticked off the disciples. Mark reads their response as staccato commands. You know that the New Testament, of course, was written in Greek. And we know in the original language, their response was three Greek words. Lord, save, dying. If you read the Greek text, it's only got those three words. Lord, save, dying. I think they were so scared they didn't even have a chance to get a full sentence out. And then they have this question. Mark chapter 4 and verse 38 records Mark's version. Teacher, don't you care that we are perishing? How do you process that response? They don't question his ability to manage the storms. They don't question the Lord's ability, his experience. Lord, have you dealt with storms like this? What they do is they question the very character of Jesus. Don't you care? Don't you care about us? Do you really love me, God? Because if you love me, you wouldn't allow this to happen. Lord, if you really love me, you wouldn't allow him to leave me. Lord, if you really love me, you wouldn't allow my family to get sick. Lord, if you really love me, you wouldn't allow my work to lay me off like this. Church, listen very carefully. Fear will allow you to question the very character of God. Fear erodes our confidence and the goodness of God. And we begin to wonder if love still lives in heaven. If God can sleep in my storm, or if there's silence from heaven when I have a serious question, do I begin to wonder, do I serve a God who really cares? Fear can stir up a flurry of faith-robbing doubts. Fear also turns us into control freaks. Hey, we want to take charge. Do something about the storm, the silence says. The disciples say. I want you to notice, the disciples never said please. They never called him Lord. They never prayed. All they did was bark commands. Save us! Save us! I mean, think about this. Fear, at its very core, is a perceived lack of control. When you are fearful, it's because you worry about having lost control. And life begins to spin wildly, and we grab for something, anything. Have you ever noticed when you fly and you go through a bit of turbulence? What do? You grab the handrest. As if you can stop the plane going down by grabbing the handrest. Hey everybody, grab your handrest. Let's take control away from the pilot. We will stop the plane from going down by everybody squeeze now. Doesn't work like that, hey? Fear brings us a false sense of security when we think we are in control. And here's an interesting phenomenon. The more insecure we feel, the more demanding we get. The more insecure we feel, the more demanding we get. I want you to think about those people in your lives. They're so demanding. They want control. You think maybe behind all that is a person who's extremely fearful. Fear does that. You know, we bare our fangs, we shake our fists. And not because we're bad people, but we are cornered. And we feel trapped, so we lash out. Fear does that. The other thing that fear does, it deadens our recall. You know, the disciples had every reason to trust in Jesus. I mean, year after year, they had been walking with Jesus. They had seen Jesus heal all kinds of diseases. They had seen Jesus, by this time, by the way, they had seen Jesus heal the lepers. Peter had seen Jesus heal his mother-in-law, effectively bringing her back from the dead. But here, they are in a boat, there's a storm, and they have forgotten all that. They've forgotten that Jesus cast out demons like bats running from a cave or flying from a cave. They were petrified, and they forgot who was in the boat with them. Where's this disciple who will raise his hand and say, guys, come on, remember, this is Jesus we're dealing with. He's got a track record. He's healed. He's raised the dead. We've seen it with our own eyes. The lepers, the blind, those who can't hear, the woman with the issue of blood. We've seen what he's done with children and old people. You know, just relax. Jesus is in the boat with us. Jesus got a track record. Where's the disciple who in the midst of the storm will say, God has done this before, he will do it again. God has got this. And folks, where's the disciples now? Are you one of them? When things are going pear-shaped, and is everybody fretting in your life, will you be the person, will you be the disciples to say, God's got this. God's got this. Don't worry, God has got this. Satan wants you to believe the lie that this, whatever you're going through, is too big for God. Satan wants to make you really doubt the character of Christ. He wants you to doubt how powerful God is. Fear wants to suck the life out of your soul. But I want you to know this morning, fear never wrote a symphony. Fear never penned a poem. Fear never saved a marriage or a business. Faith does that. Courage does that. Hope does that. Belief does that. Fear urges people, fear really herds people into a prison that's got unlocked doors. Wouldn't it be great to just live a life where you could just walk out of that? Imagine a life, I want you to imagine a life this morning, totally untouched by angst. What if faith and not fear was the default reaction, was your default reaction to change? What if something happens in your life and you want to panic, but you say, I'm going to grab onto faith. That's my default reaction. What if people in your inner circle got to expect that you were the person to say, don't worry about it, let's just pray about it. Let's just pray about it. They got sick and tired of you being the person at work, let's just pray about it. What if fear was placed on the back seat of your life and you put faith onto the front seat? What if you could take a fear magnet, put it over your heart, just suck out and extract every bit of dread, every bit of insecurity, every bit of doubt? Can you imagine one day without going through worst case scenario type thinking? Our God can talk to the wind and He can talk to the waves. We've seen Him do it before, and He will do it again. He will do it again. Why are you so afraid? Jesus said. Have I not shown you enough? You know, in the Gospels, there are 125 commands. Some of them are repeated over and over again, but the one that is repeated the most, more than any other by far, is the one, fear not. It's a command. Fear not. Do not be afraid. Church, I want you to know this morning that God does not want you to live a life in continuous fear, angst, and misery. God did not give us a spirit of fear. You know, that comes from the devil. The storm is coming. The waves are thrashing. The sky looks ominous. The lightning is zigzagging its way. But you've got the King of Kings in your boat. You've got the Lord of Lords in your boat. He is so comfortable with the situation that you are in, you're going to take a nap in the middle of it all. You don't belong to the storm. You belong to the storm stiller. And by the way, don't you want to be a person with less fear in your life? Don't you want to be that person? Down deep, do you really enjoy a life that's always marked with anxiety and angst? Every day you're wondering, oh yeah, I go to bed at night, you can't sleep because of stuff. Don't you want to live a life where that is not part of your thinking? How many of you have ever said this? You know, all my phobias put such a spring in my step. How many of you ever said, oh, thank God for pessimism. I've become such a better person since I've lost all hope. Did a doctor ever say to you, you better stop fretting because it's affecting your health? You better start fretting because it's affecting your health. We have learned the hard cost of fear. It just messes up our lives, our marriages. Our children grow up with mom and dad and always, we don't want to be those people. Oh yes, fear will not come knocking at your door, but you don't have to invite him in for dinner. And church, for heaven's sake, never allow fear to spend the night in your house. Fear makes us sour. Fear turns us into mean people. 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 7, the Apostle Paul said to Timothy, God has not given us a spirit of fear. Fear might fill our world, but it doesn't have to fill our hearts. How many of you would like to fear less in this life? I think all of us. 2 ideas as we close, and then the lesson will be yours. If you feel angst in your life, number one, recall God's faithfulness. I mean, truly, when you think of God's faithfulness in your life, in my life, He has been faithful to us. 2 Chronicles chapter 6 and verse 2, remember His marvelous works which He has done. Remember His marvelous works. God has been faithful to us. Here's a homework assignment. Why don't you catalog God's success in your life if you're struggling with this continual angst and fear in your life? Rehearse His accomplishments rather than your woes. Write today's worries in the sand. Write God's accomplishments. Chisel them in stone. Number one, recall God's faithfulness. And then finally, pray first. Pray most. Don't join the endless complaints of co-workers who are always complaining when you can be praying and praising. There's always going to be naysayers, but let you be the disciple in the boat. Says we will praise and we will pray. God's got this. You be the one who wears everyone else by just saying, let's just pray about it. Inoculate yourself with prayer, casting all your anxieties and worries and cares on Him. And let me leave you with one final thing. Remember what the Bible says. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. When all that stuff is taken over your head, it's time to just be still and know that I'm God. Your Jesus is in your boat, and He can calm a storm quicker than you can think it. Let's stand together as we sing.